हो. Yes, students, unit number 4, kinds of drama, page number 83. Subject, generous too. Okay, now here the concept contents are satire, problem play, phrase, block forms, answer to check your progress, exercise for the reading. Okay, now here satire. Exactly what is actually satire? You are going to learn in this part where for a definition they can ask for your exam point of view. Then what is a satire? If you understand a satire, there will be then other parts of the lesson you will be more uh, this easy to understand the other part. Okay. Satire. The dictionary tells us that satire is a way of criticizing a person, say, an idea or an institution in which humor is used to show their faults or weakness. The word is derived from Latin satura or satire, meaning medley or a mix. When applied to writing, it was primarily associated with words of some length that attack individuals, institutions, social groups, or cases or ideas. The main intention or function of such an exercise was to expose faults, vice, evil techniques, and lamination. It used a wide range of language and devices in order to ridicule the subject chosen. More often that not is then not it generates an attitude of amusement. But we must also note that satire bearing a few significant examples rarely stands on its own. Therefore, criticizers have argued that satire is a mode, a way or manner of putting things or attitudes in words rather than a full-fledged literary form. In narrative or dramatic work, satirical elements are employed as part of a larger whole. Contempt, concern, indignation are some of the feelings satire successfully communicates. Its but of ridicule stands outside the word itself. It aims at the really treating somebody or something of as ridiculous. Individual behavior, institutional admiration, social evils and more interpersonally political mockery, desertion, caricature, criticism, invective, irony, humor, with and perception of disparity and incongruity between ideas and practice. That is what one says and what one does. Contribute to the strength of a satirical writing. Okay. The simplest and the most common example we are familiar with is that of a cartoon in a newspaper. Okay, म्हणजे एखादं कार्टून आपण न्यूजपेपरमध्ये बघतो नेहमीच, की त्याच्यामध्ये एखादं कार्टून दिलेलं आहे आणि हाऊ इट रिॲक्ट्स. You can see some logos and some one lady is having uh, her photo in the cartoon, and some the cartoonists have described with that arrow, and it features some uh, writing part in that uh, with the cartoon, and it denotes how it is. Okay, it's a very common and simpler and familiar this thing in that of the cartoon in a newspaper. Okay, and having any, you can imagine any cartoon. Uh, Mostly, if you see the English newspaper, there are some all the time given. If you see Indian Express, if you see any other Times of India, there is a English all the time written by SS uh, BL Shaw. So you can see those riddles and all concepts in that pattern. Okay, the cartoonist exaggerates the distinctive features of famous personalities in a few bold lines. See what I explained that they have mentioned. We immediately recognize the public figure. Means how day to day, if you see, some may have reading nature of reading cartoons every day. We immediately recognize the public, but see him in a new light, a reduction that at once assume and makes us laugh. Okay, some laugh is also there. It is an oblique way of looking at a person that usually does not hurt. Usually, a newspaper cartoon carries a telling comment at the bottom, a comment on current events or public statements of declaration of policies. It undoubtedly exposes contradiction, falsehood, disparities, and untenable or irrational attitude of reputed personality. It ranges from mild mockery to uh, devastating attack of human paralysis, frailties. Okay, this is part of some simple example which you look all the time in day-to-day newspaper. So this is called the exact way of which we go, means we experience these things in day-to-day life. Okay, satires, as we have now know it today, happens to be highly sophisticated and formal. In primitive societies and tribal culture, verses were used to ridicule and abuse the enemy. Such utterances were fairly common in ancient Greek. Ritual associated with magic. Out of these ritual practice developed a number of literacy form that aimed at moral instruction, laughter, ridicule, mockery, or direct criticism, and a corrective function because they ruthlessly exposed human folly. Satire, therefore, continues to be a dominant element even in a early Greek comedy, especially that of Aristophanes. He is, Aristophanes, who is he is a Greek comedian. This was a very old serial Aristophanes that was shown on a TV serial. It was a comedy serial and very familiar, but it was a too old this thing. Okay, it was seen on the TV serial in the evening. It was going on the TV show. Okay, uh, perhaps it is a necessary for us to remember that the comic and the satire are not the same. See, the comic role and the satire, they are not same. They can, in the exam point of view, they can explain, they can uh, make a question that what do you mean by a comic and what do you mean by a satire? Okay, as early while starting the lesson, if you know exactly what is a satire, you have to know it, then you will come to know what is the difference between a satire and a comic role. So we may not be able to distinguish these two specially precisely, and we will study this and clearly as we desire. The comic role provokes laughter. Okay, you can write not only a comic, you can write this ROLE, role. Okay, comic role provokes laughter for its own sake, for sheer enjoy the satire does generate laughter, but it is used as a powerful weapon to correct, to reform, and to make people aware of the follies and limitations. We are not saying that satire does actually bring about a change. Okay, at best, it is a doubt whether art of whatever kind it be can influence people in a direct way and prompt them to act in a certain direction. If it does not, so it may degenerate into propaganda. Elements like satire, because of the rhetorical device is used, always runs this risk. Satire can be uh, convincing and persuasive, but it would be persuade anybody to act. It would never persuade anybody to act. Its impact is more indirect and related with creating a new consciousness to perceive. See, some part of satire is given the description. That is actually you have needed to write in your questions when they have asked about satire. Okay, they have given a part. They have not described satire in one para, as we have learned about a Greek stage इन द प्रिव्हियस लेसन. तसं हे सटार हे काय असं डिस्क्राईब केलेलं नाही एकाच पानामध्ये, पण हे सटार हे तुम्हाला पूर्ण या धड्यामध्ये छोट्या छोट्या कन्सेप्टद्वारे शिकवलेलं आहे, सांगितलेलं आहे. सो यू हॅव टू go through those lines. Okay, satire can be very convincing and perceived, but it would never be persuade anybody to act. It impacts in more indirect and related with creating a new consciousness to perceive reality. Ideally, satire, however, biting remains free from heartache. Hate the awakens of the man seems a sure guide to achieve artistic excellency. Jonathan Swift, 1647 to 1745. This is a exact common era where he has gone through written about the satire. Okay, one of the most formidable satirists, see, wrote following lines that point of the sense of good satire. So Jonathan Swift, if you are writing about a satire, you should know who has written. You can write down the satirist name so that it will be helpful for writing who was his era, his working period from 1647 to 1745. So many, how many years did he had made his studies for satire? Wrote following lines that you have to mention while writing your paper during and ask during your exam. That point at the sense of a good satire. म्हणजे एखादी चांगली satire. Okay. Yet malice never was his aim. He lashed the wise, but spared the name. There is one more point we need to note satire. We have said ridicules or criticize accepts of reality. But what are the grounds on which these critical attacks are founded? A powerful satire for always purpose an alternative framework of moral values. The exposures and mockery is supported by an implied idea, notion of health and balance. In fact, these values had a vision making derisible laughter rise above malice and clinical attitude. Satire thus is a strong pointer that makes us laugh at our follies. Okay? म्हणजे एखादी गोष्ट चुकतीये पण आपल्याला स्वतःहून त्याच्यावर हास्य निर्माण होते की आपल्याला कुतूहल वाटणं थोडक्यात मराठीमध्ये नाही का एखादी गोष्ट आपल्याकडनं चुकते पण न कळत आपल्याला ती कळते परंतु त्याच्यामध्ये आपल्याला जाण होत नाही थोडक्यात की आपल्याला ती न कळत हसून जाते. We have seen that satire deliberately belittles, reduce that which is held in high estimated unquestionably. म्हणजे एखाद्याला असं वाटतं की खरंच प्रश्न पडलाय का खरंच प्रश्न आहे का हा नाही अरे प्रश्न नसेल काहीतरी वेगळंच असेल म्हणजे प्रश्नात्मक चिन्ह एखाद्याच्या चेहऱ्यावर असतो काहींच्या सतत हसरा असतो चेहरा काहींच्या याच्यावर म्हणजे इट्स फॉर्म ऑफ अ way of satire. Though here we are concentrating with it is a dramatic content, we would take a very brief survey of its tradition. Two of the oldest partitioners of satire were Horace, 65 to 08 BC, and Juvenal, 60 to 140 AD. Roman poets, these are the two poets. They have described a short thing about the satire. Two poets and their verses are called Coranthona and Julevilli satires, respectively. Both of them attacked the political system of their times and mock of the human absurdities. Horace is refined, humorous when he criticizes horoscopy and human folly. Juvenal, on the contrary, has a high moral perspective and attacks vice and provokes his readers to anger and contempt. Yet another type of satire is named after the Greek philosopher Menippus, whose style was inanimated by a Roman writer. Voro, Menipina or Vorodian. Satires are prose works interspersed with verse passage using the form of dialogue or debate. Well-known persons belonging to different professions include in discussions for their respective point of view, the position it holds in thoroughly ridiculed. In action, uh, In England, two poets who distinguished themselves in writing satirical works need to mention John Dryden. See the era 1631, he worked till 1700, and the era was completed. Then who came? Alexander Pope. Then he again started working on satire from 1688 to 1744. म्हणजे हे जे एक शतक म्हणतो ना आपण, त्या शतकात या गोष्टी झालेल्या आहेत आणि त्या अभ्यासलेल्या. सी, you have to explain this. The 18th century, see the from where 17व शतक संपलं की लगेच त्यांनी in words they have mentioned. In 18th century, at least the first half could legitimately be described as the age of satire. म्हणजे एक्झॅक्ट एज जे आहे सटायरचं ते त्यांनी अभ्यास केला. पोप रोड बिटर अँड ब्रिलियंट सटायर. म्हणजे हे निष्पन्न त्यावेळेस जसं त्यांचं झालं सटायर, तसं ते वस्तुस्थितीमध्ये त्याचा वापर करण्यात आला. Pope wrote bitter and brilliant satires on the men of the letters of his day. Perhaps the greatest satires of England was Jonathan Swift. म्हणजे ही नावं पण तुम्हाला लक्षात आली पाहिजे लिहिताना, महत्वाची. आणि हे कन्सेप्ट सटायरमध्ये तुम्ही क्वेश्चन मध्ये आन्सर लिहिताना you have to write the names of these poets or the satirists who have written. Okay, so go thorough with the exact satirist of the lesson. England, perhaps the greatest satirist of England was Jonathan Swift, whose Gulliver's Travel. म्हणजे आपण आता हे Gulliver's Travel जे आपण लहानपणापासून ऐकत आलेलो आहे. A Tale of a Tub, The Battle of Books, and the most virulent of all, म्हणजे चांगल्यातलं चांगलं, The Modest Proposal, 1729. Okay, see the era are the examples of sustained satire unmatched in the history of English literature. Okay, so this is a literature what we have come through. आपण आता हे जे काय करतो, this is called as a literature, English literature. We are learning a literature. म्हणजे इंग्लिश मध्ये आपण जे काय शिकतो, सटार हे कन्सेप्ट कशात येतो? इट कम्स इन अ लिटरेचर. ओके, one of the major limitations of satire is its topical, that is a satire attacks contemporary person and evil only be when satire elevates itself to universal human concerns. Does it have the possibility of extending its appeal beyond time in spite of his bitterness and anger? Jonathan Swift alone goes beyond these times. In modern times, T.S. Eliot. Okay, see the modern time. In the modern period, modern times म्हणजे the time they have mentioned. म्हणजे आपल्याला आता जो हा जो पिरियड आहे 1888 to 1965, it's T.S. Eliot's period. Okay, in modern times, there to start with the author, how it is been म्हणजे तो एक त्यांचा पहिले जे वाक्य आहे इन मॉडर्न टाइम्स म्हणताना पण एखाद्या लेखकाचा किंवा कवीचा आपण किंवा एखाद्या सुरुवात जी करतो उत्तर लिहिताना सुद्धा, this word should be mentioned in modern times. Yes, Eliot, and then you can describe 1888 and 1896. Main part is within 1 to 3 lines only. That will give you full marks also after reading these 2-3 lines when you are writing your paper. Okay, the wasteland has been analyzed as a satire on the, म्हणजे नंतरचा पॅराग्राफ आपण त्यांनी जे काही अभ्यासला एलियटने, तेच आपण शिकतो. परंतु महत्वाचं पेपर मध्ये कसं त्यांनी डिस्क्रिप्शन कसं मांडायचं, कसं उत्तर लिहायचं, हे महत्वाचं. ठीक आहे. The wasteland has been analyzed as a satire. म्हणजे Eliot was from Westland, analyzed as a satire on the absence of spiritual values. Okay. Another important point, W.H. Auden. See the words. Another important point. See the marks are more important. म्हणतो ना आपण की कवीच्या अगोदरच त्यांची जी थोडीशी एक लिहिण्याची जी पद्धत आहे, ॲज दे हॅव डिस्क्राइब इन युअर बुक, इट्स टू गुड. अनदर इम्पॉर्टंट पोएट, म्हणजे तो एक मानच असतो प्रत्येक याचा. W.H. ऑर्डन 1907 टू 1970. मग नंतर त्याची कार्यकारिणी असतेच. wrote satirical poetry from a psycho-political point of view. See, means you will examine why I am telling this. की हे खरोखर हे त्यांची एवढ्या एरामध्ये पिरियडमध्ये एवढीसर 2 ओळीत 2-4-8 डिजिट्स मध्ये झालं म्हणजे काय मोठा लेखक झाला. पण त्याचा थोडस पुढं जे वर्तवलं त्यांनी स्पष्टीकरण, इट्स सो आफ्टर रिडिंग यू विल नो की व्हॉट एक्झॅक्ट पिरियड, की त्यांनी कसं त्यांनी तेवढं काम करून आज तेवढं त्यांचं नावात त्यांनी किती मोठं हे मिळवलं. तेवढं वर्ष काम करून म्हणजे की त्यांनी त्याचा अभ्यास करून, अभ्यासाची त्यांची ती जी एक रीत आहे, ती एक रीग जी त्यांनी त्या गोष्टीसाठी लावलेली, की ती खरोखर त्यांना तेवढा पिरियडमध्ये खरंच त्याचा अभ्यास झालेला आहे. ती 1907 आता आपल्या पिरियड्समध्ये आलं. 1907 टू 1973 रोट सटारिकल पोएट्री फ्रॉम अ psycho-political point of view. We have attempted to understand the mode of satire in terms of its language and subject matter. We often try to distinguish between the comic and the satiric. Now we will examine the manner in which the satirical mode contributes to drama. Okay. म्हणजे सटारिकल मोड हे कशामध्ये कॉन्ट्रीब्यूट होतं? इट कम्स इन पार्ट ऑफ अ ड्रामा. In order to produce what has been commonly described as a satirical comedy, a comedy in which satire is predominant. Okay, this is a much important part. The first and the foremost writer of satirical comedy is, of course, Aristophanes. It is reported that we wrote nearly 400 comedies, but all 11 are extant. Extant means very great. म्हणजे ह्या 400 मधनं ह्या 11 ज्या आहेत त्या अति उत्कृष्ट आहेत, असं त्याचा एक्स्टँडचा आहे. Asclepius was blood, rugged, and uninhibited in the satire. Every inventive to the point of beginning fantastic, he was unsparing in his criticism of men in power and also the overall temper of his times. He stood for peace and not war. Okay. These warring cities, states in Greece, the imperial ambition of the rulers and the peace-loving peasantry are some of the subjects of high ridicule. The desire for stability, peace, and happiness that makes life enjoyable. As stupid contracts with aggressive tendency of the merchants and the artisan class. म्हणजे पूर्वीच्या काळी कसं मर्चंट लोक होती आणि आर्टिशियन क्लास होता एक, म्हणजे मर्चंटच्या खालोखाल आर्टिशियन, दोज वर्क फॉर द मर्चंट्स. त्यांच्यातलं ते जे हे आहे The conflict between desire or peace and misplaced passion for wars informs his comedies, which he represents by characters belong to different classes. His gifted imagination creates a world of fantasy and dominates his dramas. The clouds, the birds, the kites, the waps. Okay, so up till here, Leicester. Up till here, we will stop for the lecture, and further from page 85, we will continue tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good day.